I can give you a very brief intro. It's a mental health app based around AI, which to me is something that I didn't think I would see for a while, but here we are.
Here we are. In the Middle Eastern culture, men are givers and they are, breadwinners and leaders. And sometimes in the chaos of all that, they tend to forget about themselves. With the use of AI, what we saw is that we were able to break that narrative a little bit of that busyness, because MindMe will send you a little message here and be like, hey, how are you doing? And a small check-in like that allows you to sort of check in with yourself and be like, okay, how am I actually doing? Being present for yourself and being gentle with yourself. So that's one form of being a man. But I think I'm also still learning what it is like for people, and it's a funny way to say it, but adult men, how they are still figuring it out. And it is a constant journey. Even as a woman, I'm like, what is it actually like to be a woman in this society? Where did our culture isolate mental health issues and be like, this is you and your problem only? Where did it become a stigma?
Hey everyone, welcome to an episode on the podcast Koon Rijjeil. So there's no other way to say this. Today we have a superstar in the room with us. Basically we have Nukhez Osama, who is the founder, you can say, of MindMe. I've heard about the platform from a friend of mine, and then I had to research into it and say, wow.
Thank you.
So I'll let Nokhez talk a little bit about it, but I can give you a very brief intro. It's a mental health app based around AI, which to me is something that I didn't think I would see for a while, but here we are.
Here we are.
So Nukhez, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. So a little bit of introduction.
Yeah.
Nukhez Osama, and I'm a behavioral psychologist here in Dubai, and also the founder of MindMe. We started MindMe around, let's say, 6-7 months ago. Has a lot to do with the fact that when I moved here, I felt like there weren't as many resources for individuals in terms of first step of care. And I heard it from all my friends. Oh, I'm so stressed out. Oh, I'm so unhappy. Oh, my therapist is busy for the next 3 months. And I'm like, that should never be the case. So also with the rise of AI, I was just like, let's see if we can couple these two together and see if there's a solution that can be provided for individuals who just need simple assistance with their stress. And it went really well. People were very happy, and currently we are just sort of in silo, building quietly and trying to push out in production development and get our licensing sorted too. Right. So yeah, super excited.
So for those who don't know Nukhez, what's one thing we need to know before we officially start the episode?
I talk a lot.
Okay.
Would be the first one, but I think something about me is quite passionate and driven about mental health. Haven't been on both sides of the table, one being a therapist but also being a patient. I know the importance of the dialogue, the importance of trust, getting the support you need at the right time, and I feel like I try to embody all those messages through what I talk about and my research and my work. So yeah,
it's incredible.
Thank you.
So sort of what made you, what was the driver? Because to me, for every person there's always a why. There's always that turning point in your life where you say, aha, that's what I need to do. What was yours?
I was quite sick and tired of how long it took for people to get help, and how long it took for people to feel like they were supported and that they had something that made themselves feel good. I think learned helplessness is a very big problem when it comes to poor well-being, and when resources are limited and you're busy and finances are something that you have to constantly balance, I think it's very easy to feel that sense of helplessness. So for me, I think when I heard some of my close friends and family talk about well-being and be like, it's this really distant, far thing that is its own weird concept, I was like, but for me, it's the opposite. It's so in tune to who I am. It's a bit a day-to-day thing. So seeing that difference in how people look at well-being made me want to feel like, no, I need to make this a day-to-day conversation. It has to be something that's regular, not this big thing oh my god, you're going to therapist. More oh cool, you're going to a therapist you go to your dentist, you know. And I think that was one of the bigger drivers, and yeah, I think that's what pushed me to also get out of my comfort zone as a therapist and do something as an entrepreneur, start something up and test it out and cry a lot about it.
Of course. But I mean, but part of the package, right?
Part of the package, exactly.
Part of the experience.
Exactly.
So what I wanted to ask you is more about like, you know, the men that you would potentially deal with.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, the podcast is, you know, quite heavily around men's mental health. So I'm always curious to see, you know, what are like the struggles that men go through, especially because I believe because it's all on AI, right? So a lot of it is, you know, it's a bit more like I'm behind the screen so I can type what, you know, what I'm feeling. So I was like curious to see like, what are the main things that men tend to struggle with if you...
I think it's that there's the aspect of their personal life of not being able to have time. I think, especially in Dubai, what we're seeing is men are very career driven, they're very busy, there's constantly something going on. And I feel like Dubai is also that kind of city where everyone's a little bit in a rush. So I feel like finding time is very difficult, and being able to prioritize themselves. I think, especially in the Middle Eastern culture, men are givers and they are, you know, breadwinners and leaders. And sometimes in the chaos of all that, they tend to forget about themselves. And I think with the use of AI, what we saw is that we were able to break that narrative a little bit of like that busyness, because MindMe will like send you a little message here and be like, hey, how are you doing? And a small check-in like that allows you to sort of check in with yourself and be like, okay, how am I actually doing? And that was something that we saw early on with when we were testing out just how the WhatsApp would run and how the app would run over time. And I feel like the stigma around well-being is still there. I think though it is a growing conversation, there's more exposure to mental health and people are more aware, I think still the action of talking, there still needs to be a lot of work done around that, and a little bit more work around that. Just because you're going through something doesn't mean like that's it, like that's who you are, you're struggling, but more that, oh, it's just a part of life, you're gonna grow out of it, it's gonna be fine, everything's gonna go back to normal, you know, like it's going to be okay at the end of the day.
You know, I'm so happy you say that line, because actually yesterday, I don't know, I was just sitting at home, I was like, I don't know, going through a lot of things in my mind, and I started journaling, like started writing this thing down, and I said to myself, I'm like, I will never accept somebody in my life who does not work on themselves, who does not find the willingness to improve, or find the, you know, who takes life as it is but like plays the victim card. You know, it's like, oh, mental health, for example, is a taboo, I don't work on it because this, or like, I don't know, I fell down, I got injured 10 times, I won't
get up the time, like
I won't
11th
get up
time.
the 11th time because khalas, like this is my sign from God. It's like no.
You have to keep getting up again and again. And I think the issue with mental health awareness and education is that often it's portrayed as this like big thing. What people don't realize is that it is an integral part of your everyday. If you completely avoid it, you're essentially avoiding something about yourself every single day, and that ignorance plays a role in terms of worsening your mental health. I think being a little self-aware and doing little small steps every single day to improve yourself in the long run helps you get better. And I think there needs to be that shift in narrative of like, just because you are doing journaling doesn't mean that something's wrong, just means that you're taking care of yourself. And there needs to be a change in that dialogue, especially for men's mental health. Like, you're taking care of yourself. It's not that something's wrong and that you're not good enough, but that you're just taking care of yourself, and you need to be present. You need to be there for yourself to be there for others. So I think there is that need of changing the narrative.
And it's interesting to say that, because as well, like, I feel like a lot of men, you know, when we talk about self-care, right, we often think about it as like a very feminine activity. It's like,
or gym.
Exactly. It's like self-care, like, you know, like these like sparkle emojis, like self-care, self-love, matcha day, you know, whatever. So it's like, it's these things that I really wish that we sort of find a way around that it's actually not the case. It's totally okay. Like, when you go to the gym, that is self-care. It's just
that is self-care.
It's just not put under that same umbrella or that same design, but it's the same thing.
It's not got that bias of like self-care, you know. It's like self-care is also just like being able to sit down with your boys and asking them how they're doing. That is a form of self-care. And I feel like that's where you're able to also realize that, oh, I'm actually not alone in this. My really good friend is also going through the same phase of life where he's like, what do I do next? How do I professionally grow? You know, am I on the right path, the purpose and everything? So I know that is another form of self-care, because you're there for yourself and others. Taking care of yourself in little steps, like having a good sleep routine. Again, self-care.
The 1%, right?
Exactly. The baby steps.
The baby steps. And it's interesting to say that, because even the other day, actually, I met someone who, he lives in Jordan, so like, I don't know this guy at all, but we started talking and And I was saying about the podcast and about all these things, and he was like, you know, sometimes I'm always afraid to tell my boys or my friends that what I'm going through because no one will understand. I'm like, hold on,
you'd be surprised.
I'm like, you would be surprised the number of times I've felt like I'm so alone. But when I mentioned it to someone else, like, I've actually been through exactly the same thing, and vice versa. And coincidentally, we had the same incident in life as well. He's like, wow, that's crazy.
And but for me, it's the surprise. It's like, why you go through it too? And it's, I think the isolation in mental health is really scary.
Do you know what I think it comes down to? Sorry to cut you. I think because a lot of times in life we often think that there's always this like overarching idea of like, my life is my journey. Yeah. Therefore, my journey is only exclusive to myself, but it's not to anyone else. But then you often forget the fact that someone else would have went through exactly the same thing.
And that it's a collective journey, often not, you know. Exactly. But I find it also surprising that, especially in a more collectivist culture, that this is still a problem, that feeling of like, I'm in this alone, especially because I know that at least in the Middle East and Southeast Asian cultures, there's this narrative of like, we're all in this together. So for me, it's always like, where did our culture isolate mental health issues and be like, this is you and your problem only? So for me, it's always like, even within my research, it's something I'm consistently trying to understand, like, where did the culture isolate mental health and where did it become a stigma? So it's always it keeps me up at night.
Yeah, well, that's good then. So how do you think we can, you know, solve the issue of loneliness? Because I think a lot of men and women go through this, especially in a city like Dubai. I've been through it a lot.
I'm going through it. Like, I feel like it's like especially when you move to Dubai as someone who's new in the city, it takes you a minute to find your group of people and even your friends. And a lot of people think workplace is where you find your friends. No, please separate the two. Loneliness in Dubai. I think it's just it's a form of also being able to put yourself out there as well. And I think this goes hand in hand with the fact that people are really busy. They don't find time for themselves. They don't do little things for themselves. They don't go to places where they'll find people who are like-minded. I mean, other than the fact that Dubai has like 6 months of really atrocious weather and you can't really go out or do anything, but the other 6 months of the year, I think we get so busy and so caught up with our own lives that we forget that there is, that there are opportunities out there. And I feel like there needs to be definitely more wholesome experiences. I do sometimes find myself thinking, I'm like, do I really want to go to this event because I want to go there? Or is it because everyone else is there, you know? And I know that a lot of people, when they move here, they experience that sort of materialistic side of Dubai, and they're like, is this really life? And they lose a little bit of sense of purpose and why they're doing it there. Like, what are they doing there? Sorry. So loneliness it's a growing problem all over the world. I wouldn't just say it's a Dubai problem, but tackling it has to be just from your closest circle, and then, you know, growing out of it. Then find your friends and invite them over, do more meaningful things, start from there, and then slowly, you know, push yourself out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, sort of add to what you're saying, like, no idea is ever a silly idea. I always think that, you know, especially like when you're trying to like meet new people and make new friends and all sort of things, you often think of like, oh, but what if they don't come because, I don't know, I'm not that funny. Or I'm not cool enough for people. So because
you'd be surprised how many people do show up.
Exactly.
You know, like, and I mean, loneliness is a very complex topic in psychology as well. It's one of those where it's sometimes it's self-inflicted, and sometimes it's you doubt yourself and you're like, I don't think anyone likes me. But then you don't realize that what you don't realize is that you have no evidence supporting that statement towards yourself.
Exactly.
You know,
and what's the metric?
What exactly are we comparing ourselves to? And I think social media has played a very imperative role in that, where it has caused people to think like, but I'm not like that, so why would they come? You know. Sure. So it's like I remind all my friends and people around me that don't compare yourself to what's going on online. You need to be your authentic self, because that is how you are able to show up for yourself. And when you're able to show up for yourself, you will naturally attract the right kind of company for yourself as well. And I think being there for yourself also makes you feel fulfilled and less lonely. Yeah, so to say.
That's true. So on the topic of, you know, well, around that idea of like men's mental health and loneliness and all these sorts of things, you know, one thing that I'm always so curious just understand more of is, what's your definition of be a man?
Be a man. To give you a little bit of context as well. I'm the oldest sister of 4 siblings. We're 3 sisters and then a tiny little baby brother, right? I think watching him grow has changed my narrative of what is it to be a man. Watching him grow has been absolutely, it's such a journey, because he's been able to, at a very young age, show up for his sisters and be like, hey, don't cry, it's okay, you're a strong girl. And then also when he feels emotional, when he's like, for example, when he misses one of his sisters, because we're all over the place, and how he's present for himself. For me, that's a form of being a man. It's like just being there for yourself and allowing emotions to come and go and not letting someone dictate it for you. And I think it's just also enjoying life for what life is. I think when we're younger, it's a lot easier to do that. Obviously, as we grow older, there's pressures of the society. There's like the social narrative that we try to fit into. But he has made me realize that aspect that it's not as deep, you know. Like I know it sounds strange to say, but it's not deep. It's not too deep. It's not super deep. Like the way he's just able to cry it out, and he's like, it's okay, I'm fine, I got this, you know. And it's just like that positive self-talk, and I'm like, that's so nice, you know. And I'm like, I tell him, like, Mohammed, keep doing that, that's good. And I think that it's a form of being a man. It's like being present for yourself and being gentle with yourself. So that's one form of being a man. But I think I'm also still learning like what it is like for people, and it's a funny way to say it, but adult men, how they are still figuring it out. And it is a constant journey. Even as a woman, I'm like, what is it actually like to be a woman in this society? So I imagine that also for men, it's really challenging, because they're breaking through so many narratives and so many biases that the society has pushed on them, and they're trying to break through it. So, you know, what is it for you though?
Oof. I've heard so many different like opinions that I'm trying to, you know, make sense of it all. And especially like even yesterday, like, you know, yesterday we had a family lunch at home, and I was looking at my dad, and I'm just hearing him talk about like, you know, life and things. I'm like, man, it's crazy. You know, like how he's shaped himself as a man, right? But to me, a man in general is, as you said, like somebody who's caring, who's giving, who's compassionate. They understand. At the same time, they do protect what is theirs. They do what's right for them and for those he really cares about. Especially like those like the closest circle, so immediate family. I often think that somebody who's disciplined in religion, I think to me that's super important. Somebody who knows the rights and wrongs of life, and if he does the wrong, he will admit that he's done the wrong. So to take accountability, that's a better word of saying it. And like a backbone. In Arabic, we use the word sanad. It's like the pillar, the backbone, the person that you rely on, right? When things are going wrong. But also somebody who also holds space. Like, you know, somebody who is not, you know, so hard on everyone else around him. You know, it's more of.
But I think to be there for others, you need to be there for yourself. And I think it works hand in hand. And I've seen that, because there is that, like, I see so many of my male friends, you know, be more available for themselves and what they're going through. It has translated in them being able to be present for their friends, their girlfriends, their partners, and their family as well. And I think when I see that, I'm like, yes, like there needs to be more of that push of like, what is it like to be there for yourself? What is it being like emotionally available? Because I've also seen so many like things out there where it's like there's a consistent shutdown of men's emotions, and kind of like making this like pretty picture and pretty box of like, this is what emotions look like. And I'm like, no, but who are we to dictate that, you know, at the end of the day? So especially as someone in the field, I feel like there needs to be more conversation, but more of an open conversation with men. Men need to be also driving that conversation, not just a professional hand there driving it forward.
You know, it's you know, what's funny is that, again, I think what you said is very true, like in the sense of we often think that, you know, the way that I'm living my life, or sorry, maybe even the way that I'm like, I portray certain things is because of an idea that someone gave me. But at the end of the day, there's never a right or wrong. There's never a book that we were given when we were young. Like, yeah, this is what emotions look like. Page number 1. It's like, no, it's very subjective.
There's this thing, it's called emotions are not facts. Emotions are what you're feeling. They change based on circumstances and experiences, and obviously the context in which the emotion has been emotioned. But emotions are not fact. And this is also something we say in therapy. It's like, they're like, just because you're feeling bad, it does not mean that you are bad. All right. Just because you are feeling a little put down or let down does not mean that, you know, people don't care about you, because there's often that immediate translation of like, this is emotion, this is a fact then. And it's more about allowing feelings to come and go and be like, it happens. You got to be present for yourself, allow the emotion to ride through. And I feel like this is something that needs to be kind of almost taught at younger ages. I'm like, sometimes I feel like the education system failed us by not like letting us understand these little things from a younger age, and more like we come into adulthood and we're like, whoa,
okay,
this is complex.
Yeah.
This is interesting, to say the least. But, you know, I do wish that the education system put maybe a little bit more emphasis, especially around like adolescence age, of like what emotions are going to be like, what you're going to feel as you're growing older. The feeling of guilt, shame, of like not being able to fulfill other people's dreams. And this is very common in our society, where it's like our parents want us to do a certain thing and we want to do something different, and then the guilt and shame of that, but how to navigate those emotions. And I feel like it starts young. And there's obviously like with women, it's like there's a sense of community, because we're all like, we try to support one another. And I feel like that isn't as present for young men at that age. And I feel like it starts from that point almost.
So all right, so for somebody who doesn't really know how to separate feelings from realities, how would you like again, like what's a very practical way?
Feelings from reality. The reason I have to think about it is because it's obviously based on context. So it's the way I always say, it's you need to be able to decipher what your thoughts are and what your feelings are. All right. So let's say you're stuck in traffic and you're running late to a meeting, and you know your boss is like waiting on you. Now, there is the thoughts and feelings part that kicks in, and this is a part of the CBT model, so cognitive behavioral therapy, the most common form of like practice in psychology. And what you do with your thoughts is it sort of like underlines your feelings. If your thought process is, oh my God, I'm such a lazy person, I don't care about my life, and you know, my boss is pissed at me. If you start thinking like that, the way you start feeling is also going to be negative. All right. Essentially, you're going to start beating yourself up. If you're feeling negative, your behavior essentially starts becoming biased to negative things. So you're going to be frustrated. When you're feeling negative, your decision making is also extremely skewed. So it's literally like it's a snowball effect. Negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative behaviors. Now, the way that I always tell my friends and clients and like anyone that I advise is that when it comes down to emotions, what you need to do is first track that the thought, and try to change the thought. So in the case of running late to your meeting and your boss is like waiting for you, you got to remind yourself that at the end of the day, the traffic is not in your control and you're doing your best. All right. That immediately you're present for yourself. So the thought changes. You're like, I am trying my best. Let me communicate. What do I have control over? Am I really a lazy shithead, or am I just, like, is this one-off thing? All right. Now, if it's not a one-off thing, then obviously you need to change something about you.
Time management.
You got to fix yourself. But if it's it's that initial thought. If you're able to address the initial thought and change it into something more neutral, it doesn't always have to be positive, but something neutral, it does have a trickle effect on your feelings. Your feelings will be less negative, and then you'll feel better. If you're feeling more neutral or you're feeling fine, then your behavior associated to it is also neutral, rather than behaviors feeling a little like all over the place. And we see it very often in clinical cases, and even in general. If you're thinking negatively, you're feeling negatively. If you're feeling negatively, you will behave negatively. You know, and it's often what we see with self-esteem related problems. If you think negatively about yourself, you'll feel negatively about yourself, and then you'll limit yourself for no reason. So that's how I would say it's the quickest way to decipher your feelings, to understand that they will come and go, and in a different situation it will be different, but it's also how you think about the situation.
How you think and what you do. I mean, what you do is also, I think, equally as important as the next step, because at the end of the day, like I said, so many things in your control, but how do you go about it?
Yeah.
Do you take on that responsibility and say, hey?
It's something called attribution. Do you externally attribute it, or do you internally? And I think sometimes we're too hard on ourselves. And then there's obviously the other extreme where it's like people don't take accountability and responsibility. So it's more about, how do you attribute negative situations? Do you always think it's your own fault and you think you're a miserable person for it? And it's also, how is that self-narrative? And I think that's where the problem starts. If you start thinking so negatively about yourself, of course you're going to feel like shit. You know, of course you're going to feel miserable. And I always tell people, like, you need to be kinder to yourself, because if you're not kind to yourself, who's going to be kind? The world is tough as is. The least we could do is make the place that, you know, we are in constantly, which is our head, at least that needs to be a nice place to be in. So
that's super true. Something that I often always say to people, just don't make life hard. Like, you know, it's funny, the other day I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, the best way to live is to live cluelessly. Just live. Honestly, like, there's no point.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like, you just sit down, you live your life, la la lands all around you. Of course, you take note of the important stuff in your life. I'm not saying that, but have a very easygoing mindset. Like, it makes life a lot easier. And the best example is kids. Yesterday, again, we had a family dinner, lunch. So my brother-in-law was saying, he's like, man, like, I often forget that kids are exactly the same as humans, in the sense of, like, when they're having a bad day, they will cry, they will be so annoying to deal with.
But they're very present with their emotions, so they will feel it. You won't see a kid hide their emotions.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly, which is how I think we should live, to an extent. To an extent.
To an extent.
So, I mean, show your emotions, but not in the way that it's like...
All I'm thinking is, like, men in traffic and women in traffic scream and cry on Hesse Road.
Well, then, that's a problem for later. Maybe we'll get them to MindMe, and then we can sort of solve it there, if we could.
No, but I agree. I feel like the way kids are just very present in their emotions, and they feel it, and they don't make it the highlight of their day. I think as we grow older, sometimes we anchor the entire day in those 5 minutes that we were feeling shit. By the way, sorry for...
No, please. Be open.
But it's I see it even in myself. Like, I have one bad meeting, or I feel like I was running 5 minutes late, and that rushed feeling makes me on edge, and now my entire day feels like it's been on edge. And I have to tell myself, like, okay, no, it was just those 5 minutes. You're okay now. Get on with the rest of your day. You know, the way you move with all the incoming minutes, that matters more than what happened in those 5 minutes. Sure. So yeah, it's a constant rephrasing, though. It's a bit of mental discipline to keep yourself, like, accountable and be like, it's gonna be fine. It's fine. Don't worry. I think in terms of, like, there are some systemic issues in which the society pushes us in a way that we think we have to be quite harsh on ourselves, and that's where you have to have the self-discipline to correct yourself and be like, no, you're fine. Everything's going to be okay.
So if you're somebody who's a drastic thinker, and if something is not going your way, and you have those 5 minutes that become the 24 hours of your day, how would you sort of... Because I used to be like that, by the way.
No, I was likewise. So I used to be like, 10 minutes gone, like, we're bad, like, tired, like, the whole week is gone. Forget the day. The whole week. It's
revolved around that one conversation, or that
one event, that one incident. And I think if you find yourself being someone, like, if you find yourself as someone who gets sort of anchored into these situations, I think again, mental discipline comes into play, and you have to remind yourself that you are still in control of what you make of the rest of the day. Those 10 minutes have happened, and be present in those 10 minutes. And I too, like, there are moments where I catch myself being so, like, upset about something, and I'm like, you know what, suppressing it is really not, like, it's not serving me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the time to be present. Let me feel it out. Let me journal it. What I usually do is on WhatsApp, I send myself a voice message. I don't have time to journal, so I send myself a voice message saying, I'm so irritated. I'm not happy with what it is. I get it out of my system. Once I have it out of my system, I'm like, okay, I've given myself the 10, 20 minutes I needed to cry about it, to whine about it, to mope about it. Now, what do I want to do with the rest of the day? It's that challenged narrative of like, what do I want to do with the rest of the day that I do have? And I'm like, you know what? Let me do something that makes me feel good. Something small. The small little change, it just puts you in a right sort of mindset, it pushes you to feel a bit better. It also helps you get over whatever it was that has been bothering you. And because you've processed it and you've kind of purged it out of your system, you've done the first big thing that you need to do. Second, you're also framing for the rest of the day in terms of what do I need to do to feel good. I would say that would be my top advice. And it's something I do for myself as well. Like, it happens. You're going to have terrible days, but it's how are you going to move forward towards the good days.
100%. And I think, as well, like one of the biggest sort of challenges that we have is that, we often think that the world is so bad. And that even when you do those things, like if you, for example,
like what's the point of it?
Yeah, but even like, let's say you go on that run or you have that nice meal or you, I don't know, open up Netflix, watch a nice film and you finish, you're like, yeah, but that doesn't change anything. Like, and I often found myself in those positions where it's like, I go on that whatever activity that I want to do, but then when I finish, I'm like, yeah, that was good. That was really good for me. And I knew that I needed it, but
did it really serve you?
Yeah, like did the reality change in that situation? No, it's the same. And I think that's often a lot of thing that maybe a lot of us struggle with. I don't know if it's maybe more specific to men or women. I think everyone has this. Yeah, it's a universal problem.
I think it's also a mindset thing. It's like if you're more realistic, it tends to happen. Like I can be like that from time to time where I'm like, I've had a bad day and I've done something nice for myself, but I'm like, it's like I'm still like the situation is still bad. It hasn't changed. I think in those situations it's about like understanding what you do have control over and what you can change. If it's bothering you again and again and it's resurfacing as an emotion, go back to the thought and the event and be like, okay, what exactly is it that's bothering me so much? And is it something that I have control over? If you don't have control over it, then there's a little bit of submission to the situation where you're like, okay, I can't do anything about it. I have to be hopeful. Right? If there is something you can do about it, do it in a way that is not too impulsive. Obviously, I think impulsivity comes often, it's coupled with negative emotions. People want to act and fix the situation immediately, not realizing that they may be making the situation worse. And I think it's, act on what's required action on, but also be patient, be easy on yourself, I think this is very common with anxiety. I feel like it's like you feel like things are coming, like you just feel the rush of like, oh my God, I have to fix it. And we end up getting into the loop of wanting to gain so much control over the situation that we act out of impulse rather than logic and rationale. So
yeah, and I think as well, like a lot of times as men we often jump to that solution of like let's fix, where probably isn't even the thing to do. Sometimes what you need to do is just to sit down.
But I've seen both in men and women. It's like I've seen the action aspect where I'm like, I need to fix it, but I've also seen the complete like resistance to it, be like, no, I don't want to, like the complete avoidance to it, sorry, it's the word. So I feel like the action is more present in men, where it's like they will immediately fix it. But I think it comes from the fact that there is this narrative of like, you are a man, you need to control it, you got to fix it. And sometimes it happens without having a conversation, and that just worsens the situation. Or they're not very, like they haven't really understood what's really bothering them and what they really want out of the situation. So they just end up acting out, and then it actually gets worse, or it doesn't serve them. So
no, it's exactly true. I think, again, I think a lot of the times, we often fixate on the idea of I'm a man, irrespective if the situation is solvable or not. We will push and push and push until you get to a point where it's like, we run ourselves to the ground. I think it's happened a lot of times in my life, and as well those I've like witnessed around me, where it gets too much for a person to really handle, which
I think this is where like the there's an importance in the psychoeducation and just like basic tools of how to like help yourself, and I think this is where social media is doing a great job in like putting out more resources out there for people to learn. But I do feel like there needs to be there is a need for more systems that need to be in place to have this more integrated in school, in work as well. It's also like how the people around you are also talking and discussing things. So it's in little things when it comes down to the psychology and the behavior of things.
Yeah, and as well, like, to sort of build on the idea of like help yourself out. I often think that, so I always reference him, and I'm not, this is really not an ad for Simon Sinek, but he often always says in most of his podcasts, he always says that there's never a section for for help others, but there's a section called self-help. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we often neglect or don't do enough, is actually helping others. When I see that, let's say you're struggling, I wouldn't know what are the tools to help you or how to actually be human enough to support you, guide you, help you. But it's more of like all these very like happy dilly-dally self-help books, and you read it, and then at the end of it goes like, this is just advice from a like to why'd you make me read it, so but that's the problem though, right? Is that as well, like even as a collective in general, like men and women, like I think, no, to be fair, women do a much better job than men for sure in this, where you guys actually know how to help each other. I think as men, we often have like this very tribal effect of like, we get in our groups and we say words and it makes sense somehow in our minds, but I think like in terms of like general, like actually how to really help someone, that's something that we don't know enough about.
I think it's also like there's as you mentioned, there's the $1 billion industry of like self-help books. They are one size fits all, and it's very much like this generic advice of like, do this and it should help you somewhere. And obviously we're never really taught enough about how to help others whilst being able to be present with ourselves. I've seen the opposite problem, where I've seen most of my friends care so much about each other and they completely neglect themselves. And I think this is more common in my female friends, where they help each other, and when you're like, oh, but what about you? How are you dealing with the situation? And my friend is like, I don't know, I'm surviving. And I'm like, oh.
That doesn't sound too promising for you.
No, but it's like, I think there is a core role that education of mental health plays in being able to help ourselves and others, how to be present for yourself and others at the right time and the right amount, how to not overdo it for others, how to not overdo it for yourself either. You don't want to dig yourself too deep of a hole, and then need, like, there's nothing wrong with getting expert help, but you also want to be smart with how you help yourself. I've seen a lot of people also dig really, really big holes for themselves and then be like, oh, but this is not, like, this is what mental health is all about. And I'm like, that's the over romanticism of like mental health. I think it's still, obviously, mental health is still something that everyone is getting to know and understand. There's still so much research that is going on mental health. As someone who's a part of the research community, there's so much we're still trying to understand in terms of how society impacts well-being, how well-being is I don't know, not manifested, but it's how it's practiced amongst different individuals, men, women, hormones, brain activity. Like there's so many factors. Like it is something that we're still understanding. So I think when I see a lot of my friends just, they're like using these self-help books, it's good that there's resources out there, but also understand what you really need rather than just reading a generic self-help book. And go to a therapist. Honestly, I think often not people think that therapy is like a medical thing you only go to when shit hits the fan. No, go to a doctor like you go to your dentist for like a checkup. a therapist will be able to sort of help you just like correct errors in your thinking, will be able to help you just also navigate some of the difficulties within your personal or work life. And they're literally paid to be there for you. Like quite literally paid to listen and be there for you. And if you have to take one session a month, which is quite decent, I would say, or one session every few weeks, it's just a good checkup. For yourself, and they will help you also understand how to really be there for yourself and give you the tools for how to be there for others whilst being there for yourself. And I think the experts know what they're doing. They're great therapists in the region as well, and there's a lot of these platforms coming up which they're going to connect you with the right therapist as well. So I feel like there are more and more services coming up, and I think people should utilize it.
Sorry, so I want to go back to something you mentioned a bit earlier, which is about all the research you've been doing, or potential research that's being done. I often always think about, how much of this all as well comes down to human willingness. Like at the end of the day, there's so much, impact, right? So society, culture, friends,
parenting,
whatever.
like everything. There's so many factors.
But then I'm also of the mindset that, like, sorry, but anything you do in life, any decision you take, is 100% your own choosing.
Your own choice.
So to me, it's always like, look, as much as I like to think that, of course, there's like, like an impact from like society, culture, friends, family, and they are there. I'll tell you, I like there are things that my ideas have been shaped through those buckets. But at the end of the day, it's also up to you to know, like, okay, does this make sense for me? Yes, no, khalas, throw it out, move on. So I often, wonder if like that's ever taken into account in research, like
for sure. Willpower and agency is something that is often considered in research, but then I think especially in cultural research, we're still trying to understand the impact of culture. A lot of my research is the research that I've been conducting is to understand the role of parenthood and childbearing in career-driven women. A lot of the times there is this thought process that, if you're from a super traditional background, you're more likely to push your career around to facilitate motherhood. My study found the exact opposite. We found that it has nothing to do with motherhood, but it actually has to do with your cultural support. The more supported you are, the more career driven you are. So, and this is against all the narratives we've ever read about. So for me, it was just like a challenge of like, wait, we're still understanding how culture plays a role. And I think especially for culturally dense places, it's still a question of what is the interplay like, and how much willpower is still present, and how much influence does culture or all these external factors have on willpower. We know enough about the Western models and how all that is going. We don't know enough about our own society and our own cultures, and I feel like there needs to be a greater emphasis on detangling those. As much as willpower plays an effect, policies and the way the society structure has an effect as well. One of the implications of my research was that there needs to be a change of this work-life balance for women. There needs to be a change in that narrative, and there needs to be more solutions on integration of family with work. Now, if those are possibilities being set up at a workplace, that also allows for people to behave differently. So it's the policies like, one doesn't realize how much policies dictate a lot of our behaviors, but it does, and research has an impact on policies. And it's the same thing with a lot of the research around men's mental health. What are some of the policies, or what are some of the factors that contribute to limited mental health awareness in men, or limited action in men's mental health? So we're still trying to understand what part of culture really plays into that, and what part of willpower plays into that. So there's a lot of awareness and a lot of change, but we're still trying to understand the nitty-gritty of things, because we can't just take a Western model and apply it in a culturally dense place, because it won't fit and it doesn't serve purpose for us. And then if anything, we find more frustrated. Like I've seen it for myself, where I'm like doing a few of the Western model exercises, and I just find myself, I'm like, this is not helping me. This is not doing me any good. And so it's the same thing, I would think, at a grand scheme of things as well.
I think it's true. Like at the end of the day, I like similar to your research, I'm always often like questioning, like why is it so difficult for us to accept mental health in general, men's mental health, maybe even more specifically? And what are those sort of barriers to entry? Like, you know, especially even like on an app level or a platform level, or if it's even just simply going therapy or doing something small, that's just buying a notebook to journal on. Like, what's
I think the barriers have a lot to do with the fact that the access to help is so difficult. There's that aspect as well. Getting help is not as easy as it seems. And I'm saying this as someone who also wanted help at some point. Finding the therapist that fits your needs, understanding what therapy is, it seems so big and daunting. I mean, people need to understand mental health is really important. It's not something light and like flimsy. It's as important as your dental health, as your like cardio health. It's important. You need to be very, you need to educate yourself and understand what you're doing with it at the end of the day. And it's such it's one of those things where it's still in its developing years in terms of what is mental health in the region. Simultaneously, you want the help, and it gets confusing where to get the right help. People often think therapy is the only solution, and people leave it as a last resort, forgetting that you can actually go to therapy every now and then just for like a little chit chat. I mean, I'm not saying go have chit chats with your therapist every single day, but you know, a form of self chit chat is like journaling. And I think I know I'm saying this again, but I think there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on what we can do for ourselves, and how to be present for ourselves, because that is a form of therapy. Neglecting your emotions, neglecting your needs yourself results into unmet needs, which result into emotional ups and downs, and that has its like literal like cascade of effects. So yeah, this is where I'm like, you know, there are definitely barriers, but identify also what your own barriers are first, you know. So,
and you know what I love about what you're saying, which is sort of like framing my next question, which is you're emphasizing a lot about the self, and I'm so curious to know, like, what was your journey like? Because it feels as if like, you know, maybe you haven't taken maybe as much care as you would have maybe earlier on in your life. So then it hits you at some point like, okay, hold on. Hold on, this is not normal.
This is not good.
So like, well, you know, what was your aha
moment? So I had been in therapy, so I started therapy relatively young. I started when I was 17, when one of the teachers at my school had kind of like flagged it to my parents, like, Nukhez seems to have more like ADHD like symptoms, just gotta get checked. And bless my parents, they did try. We went to a therapist, and the therapist is like, okay, there seems to be a few things at play here. And obviously teenagehood is not easy for anyone, especially when you are bombarded with bigger questions in life, like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And you're 17 and you're like, I just want to
I don't know,
I just want to chill,
princess, I don't know, I want to sit down by the beach,
I want to paint and draw and everything. And I think for the longest time I was always like chasing, like especially during college, and even to some extent now, chasing a dream and constantly going. And it wasn't until I felt a little burnt out, and I was like, my personal narrative was like, but I'm getting therapy, but I'm getting all the help that I want. Why am I still feeling burnt out? Why am I still so dissatisfied? And I'm like, and then it just kind of hit me one night. I was like, but am I doing these things for myself, or am I doing this for external validation? Or am I doing these am I going to therapy because I need therapy, or is it because people have told me therapy is the right thing to do? And then it's really about like, I really just sat myself down and I was like, what do I really need? Why am I doing this? It's the question of why for myself. And it helped me realize, my aha moment was like, okay, I know I do need help with my stress management. I know that I am career driven, and I know that I love doing things, but how can I balance this in a way that it doesn't become the only center focus in my life, and that it's more that my happiness is the goal, not being able to achieve these things. Like, that shouldn't be the goal. And it took me a while, and it's still something that I work on. I'm like, okay, I love doing all of these things, but am I happy doing all of these things? And I sit myself down and I ask myself these questions, and I'm consistent with it. Like, if I find myself like just doing a lot of things and I'm like, wait, hold up, am I doing it because I actually want to? And it helps me be more present with myself, and it helps me sort of be there. And also, by being there for myself, I'm able to be there for others, so that helps all the time. So that was definitely my very big aha.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, you know, your aha moment, I think, can resonate with a lot of people. I think that, especially like, you know, when you're in this age of like
hustle, and especially in Dubai.
Hustle culture, and you're burning yourself to the ground. And, you know, on this topic, so, you know, I often look at my dad as like, you know, the guy, right? And I often think that, you know, he's done the hustle culture. He's been there, he's done it. Yeah. Lives, you know, a good life, thankfully. You know, but I often wonder, like, how much of that did it actually impact his own mental health? And did anyone even know, you know, like him, those around him, did anyone, you know?
Absolutely.
And I really question that. I think now maybe there's a little bit more awareness to it, just a bit, but I think we neglect it because chase your dreams, you know, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Things I often tell myself, by the way. I say this to myself sometimes.
It's like balancing those two narratives of like, okay, I want to be healthy and happy with myself, but it's also I need to push myself out of my comfort zone. Like, how do I balance the two of those? So I know that it's not easy, you know, and especially it's not easy being in the generation that we were from. It's not easy considering our role models. It's not easy considering what we want to do as well. But I think we just gotta try, gotta be present for ourselves and push ourselves. But push yourself within reason.
Within reason, sure. But I'm these past few weeks I've been leaning more towards push yourself. Mm-hmm. There are times where, I say push yourself within reason when there's not so much at stake.
But, you know, even if you push yourself, then it's like when you find yourself like struggling, it's also then being there for yourself. Yeah. You know, like I've recently been like, I got back into running and I'm trying to push myself really, really hard. Yeah. And especially because I took such a big break from running, and coming back to my old goal is taking me a minute.
Of like running 42K in like sub 2 hours.
Yeah.
Is like, well,
keeping pace and not slowing down. And like, I obviously tell myself, like, I push myself, but I'm also like, I don't belittle myself when I don't reach my goal. I'm like, it's okay. I'm working on it, you know? And that's the balance of like pushing yourself, but being there for yourself. Yeah. And it's the same thing with my career and with work. I don't push myself, and I don't think to myself like, oh my God, I'm not able to achieve this. Like I'm ridiculous. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, no one knows what they're doing, because everyone's trying to figure it out. And I think the balance of those two narratives also keeps me grounded. Yeah. And it doesn't let things get that deep. Like I know I said this earlier as well, but I think sometimes you get so hung up on little things and we really beat ourselves about it. And this is where I tell myself, it's not that deep, Nukhez. It's okay. It's not like, don't cry over something the 10th time. 8th time was
8th time is it
was enough.
10th is a bit excessive now.
So this is where I'm like, I remind myself, balance the two, you know. Push yourself for growth, and a growth mindset is where, you know, the secret sauce lies. But also being kind to yourself in everything allows the growth to continue. And there's a couple of different examples. It's one like the story for hermit crabs. Hermit crabs, they often, when they grow out of their shells, they have to leave their shells, and when they don't have their shell on, they're very, very vulnerable to the stresses of life. You don't see a hermit crab beat themselves over about the fact that they had to leave that shell. Instead, what they do is that they look for their next new shell for protection. And I think that's how people should be. It's like, they don't beat yourself up when you're growing. Find what's the next best thing that helps you stay strong. So that's one of my favorite comparisons.
It is quite a nice analogy or comparison to make. I often think that, you know, especially like with, you know, with like, especially with men, like, again, I think I've said this earlier, like, I think we often don't know when to press break. And I'll be blunt about this, and because I say this from my own experience, from people I've seen around me, from the guys that I train with as well. Like Brahim is, like perfect example of this. Like me and him often push each other so much every single day, because we want the best for each other, right? And it's part of like that growth community, growth mindset, you know. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, when is it time to stop? but then I'm like, but then there's a reason why I'm on this boat. There's a reason why I'm in this conversation with him or with anyone else, because there's something greater out, you know. And Chris Williams had said this once. He probably referenced it from a different podcast, but he was saying like, I think the magic you're looking for is on the opposite side of what you're too afraid to do, or which maybe in this case is pushing that 1 kilometer more, or that one.
It's also similar to the quote of like, the magic is in what you're avoiding.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I tell myself that when I'm avoiding a deadline, I'm like, okay, let's just do it, you know.
Let's do it, yeah.
So exactly. and I think it has more to like, it taps into pushing yourself out of the comfort, out of your comfort zone, but also confronting some of the self-limiting beliefs that we have, or sorry, limiting self-beliefs. Sorry. And I think that's why it helps to push yourself within, again, reason. You know, I've seen it's the reason I say within reason is because I've also been on the other side where I've pushed myself so hard and I've burnt myself to the ground and it didn't help. And I've seen so many of my friends do that. And I've seen a lot of my male friends do that than my female friends, where they've push, and they're just consistently unhappy. And this is where I'm like, no, be present. You realize how far you've come. A lot happens and a lot changes in a year.
That's true.
So if you're pushing yourself, have benchmarks, be visual about your growth, and be mindful about your growth as well.
And set proper metrics, like against what are you.
Data-driven metrics.
Data-driven, not data-driven, but like, but something to measure off of, right?
Yeah,
like at the end of the day, somebody might tell you, I want to run.
Otherwise, you compare it to something that is completely fuzzy. Like the comparison is so loose, and then you're comparing it to like completely ridiculous metrics. And I have a very dear friend who reminds me, she's like, Nukhez, a year ago you were so unhappy, you know, and you were sitting on an idea. Now a year later you're doing research, you're working on something that you love, and alhamdulillah, she's just like, look how far you've come, you know. And I don't think it would have been possible without obviously pushing myself, but also making that space of like, okay, wow, you gotta celebrate yourself, you gotta be like, oh my god, look how far I've come. And I think this is something that needs to be practiced more, like self-celebration, especially for men.
Definitely. You
know, I think men are sometimes they're so fixed on the goal that they forget how far they've come.
We often think about the destination but not the journey. So like I think we often put a goal of like, for example, speaking of running, like, you know, when I ran my first 10K in December ever.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I compared it to a time that a friend of mine had. I'm like, I need to beat that time. But they run a lot more than I did. I beat that time, but it didn't. But to me, it didn't matter at the time of how I got there. It's matter that you got there.
It didn't matter like how you got there in terms of your journey and your training and your effort. Exactly,
and that's the story of life. That a lot of us put like a goal.
Yeah. But
we don't think about how, if we've hurt someone, didn't hurt someone, did it the right way, did it the wrong way. It's like, it's even like when you look at like organizations, like if somebody's getting promoted, they could cheat their way up and get promoted, but then the guy who's actually worked super hard and didn't get the results. So it's these sort of things, right?
And it's also, I've seen so many people who do achieve, like get to the goal and they're really unhappy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I've seen this in people around me where it's like they finally got what they were working so hard for, but they're so like, it doesn't have an effect. It's like, and I remind them, like, you've worked so hard to get here, and they're like, yeah, but this is what I was expected to do anyway. And then they completely remove that sense of celebration, and they're even more unhappy. And I'm like, oh, babes, you know, if you're not celebrating yourself and the world isn't, then you're not gonna feel that sense of accomplishment. And then why are you pushing yourself so hard? So it becomes a bit of a circular conversation for sure. It's like, push yourself, celebrate yourself, push yourself, celebrate yourself. But if you don't, and you're always waiting for others to do it, then, and when they don't do it, then you will feel really, really miserable, really crap.
Yeah, but do you know what I think it comes down to? I think as well, like, we often romanticize that dream or that goal or that vision, so that when you don't get there, it's like, oh, it doesn't look the same way that I imagine in my mind. It means I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Or it means that if I've gotten there, there's like something better.
I had that with my master's. I did my master's through COVID, balanced it with like 3 other jobs, got the grades I wanted. But when I graduated, I was like, that's it. Yeah. This is it. And this was like, it was just like that for me, was like, it triggered me into going back into therapy. And I went to my therapist and I was like, what the hell? Like, I worked so hard. And she was like, did you celebrate your entire journey? And I was like, no, but I had to do my master's. Like, that was a given. And she was like, no, but did you express how happy you were with yourself. And I was like, no, I didn't. She's, of course you're not you're not happy with the end goal because you've been so dismissive of everything that led up to it.
Yeah.
You know, and my master's was a big wake-up call for me.
Well, I think this is a perfect segue to how to end the episode. So Nukhez, we have a notebook, which is basically filled with quotes at this point. With basically, what I'm going to ask you to do is write a quote that has helped you in your life when you've been feeling super down, or maybe a piece of advice that you'd want to give somebody who is maybe not in the highest moment in their life and is looking for that extra bit of motivation to keep on going.
I have two.
Well, then you can make it your own.
Okay. All right. Do I also have to mention it on the podcast?
Let's do that.
You live to learn and you learn to live.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
As you're living, you learn so much about life, and you end up learning how to actually live happily. It's your mistakes, your lessons that allow you to be alive, obviously, that give you the feeling that you are present, but you got to learn from them, and you end up learning to live, you know. So it's I know, like, it's often say, you like, you know, it's a common quote. Like, I've heard a lot of other people mention it as well. It's like, I'm learning and I'm like, you know, I gotta live, and it's like, yeah, but you live to learn, and then you eventually learn to live.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's really good.
so there's another one as well, but it's especially when I'm going through really tough days. You'll have bad days, but you'll have good days as well. And these are just days. And inshallah, you'll have so many more to live. So, you know, bank on the fact that you will have more good days. So, and this is what, especially, it's something I remind myself when I know that I'm going, like, it's been a particularly bad day. And I'm like, no, I'll have, inshallah, a good day right around the corner.
Right around the corner. So, yeah. I mean, to me, it's always like a bad day is never a bad life. You know, it's
just a bad day.
It's a bump in the road. Sure, embrace it, take it as it is, take the learnings, but move on. It's not forever. Nothing's forever.
Nothing's forever. Everything comes
to an
end.
Scary thought, but yeah, nothing is ever forever. So
yeah. No, thank you.
Well,
that's
thank
a nice
you
one.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome, Taif. Well, thank you so much for being on the episode and obviously sharing like everything. That was honestly,
thank you for having me as well.
No, it was really my pleasure, and just thanks a lot for sharing your insights, your knowledge, your energy as well. That's often
always happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome.